Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Fall 23 YA preview with Candlewick Press. My name is Stephanie Pando, and I'm part of the publicity department here at Candlewick. I'm really happy to be here with everybody this evening. I'd also like to introduce my wonderful colleague who will join me during tonight's preview.
Hi, I'm Sophie Badawi. I'm also part of the publicity department at Candlewick, and I'm very excited to be here virtually with you all.
We're happy to give you a sneak peek of our newest YA titles for the fall, which published between September 2023 and February 2024. And we're very lucky because we have a panel of fabulous YA authors and a special guest moderator tonight who we will introduce later on. If you find it useful, you can follow along in the Edelweiss catalog with all of the titles we'll be talking about tonight with the link that was just dropped into the chat box. You can also request digital ARCs through Edelweiss at any time during the preview by clicking on the request bar on the right-hand side. At the end of the event tonight, there will be a link that will pop up on your screen to request physical ARCs as well. There's also a Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, so feel free to submit any specific questions for our speakers through the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer as many as possible during the panel tonight. You'll also notice at the bottom of your screen, there is a poll button, or it popped up when you entered. We'll have one running throughout the preview at any time for you to answer, just for fun. You'll also notice at the bottom of your screen, there's a closed captioning. It should already be running, but you can toggle it on and off with the closed captioning button. And if you're having technical difficulties, not to worry, this video will be on demand for the event following the end of tonight's event. For all registered attendees, there will also be a virtual goodie bag with all the links mentioned tonight, including the request form for Fizzle ARCs. Before diving in, we have a few things we want to get to you as housekeeping details.
Yes, first, we are active on social media, so be sure to follow us on our Candlewick Press Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. And please tag us if you're posting during this preview with the hashtag CandlewickYAPreview. We would love to hear what you all are most excited about. And you can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Walker Books US for commercial middle grade and YA fiction, and also our newest imprint, My Teen Press, a first of its kind collaboration between a university press and a children's publisher, covering picture books, middle grade, and of course, YA. And are you a bookish influencer and want to keep up to date on special events like these previews, be added to our publicity outreach for new titles, and be sent ARCs to review? If you're not already part of our reviewer program, you can fill out our book influencer and reviewer form to be considered. There is a QR code on the screen here that you can use, or there will be a link provided in our virtual goodie bag at the end of the event tonight.
We also highly encourage you to tune into our Black Creators series, which is in its third season. In this educator-focused series, highlighting the work of Black authors and illustrators, Dr. Sonia Cherry Paul, best-selling author, founder of Red Clay Educators, and co-founder of the Institute for Racial Equity in Literacy, leads discussions with children's book authors and their work, and these powerful ways these books can live in the classroom. For a full schedule and more information on how to participate in these conversations, you can go to blackcreatorsseries.candlewick.com. We are also pleased to highlight our upcoming film adaptations of our books. Landscape with Invisible Hand arrives in theaters August 18th, 2023, and stars Tiffany Haddish and Asante Black. The movie, based on the novel by the same name by M.T. Anderson, is a darkly satirical story where two teens scheme to protect their family's future after an alien occupation promised economic stability and left the Earth's population in financial ruin. Feed, also by M.T. Anderson and recently named one of Time Magazine's 100 best YA books of all time, is being adapted into a feature film with Stanley Calloway to write and direct. Feed is set in a future dystopian America where the internet connections feed directly into the consumer's brain. Last but not least, we want to make sure that no matter where you are, you can find some of our YA authors appearing virtually and in person at various festivals and conferences, with more to be added in the coming months. You can check out each of the festival or bookstore's websites for more information. And now on to our fall 2023 titles. Gather, by debut YA author Kenneth Cadow, follows a resourceful teenager, Ian, who shouldn't have a dog, but much like his life, a lot of things that shouldn't happen end up happening anyway. Despite the many obstacles Ian faces, having to find a job to support his mother as she tries to overcome her opioid addiction, having Gather, his dog, beside him makes things easier. But tragedy strikes his rural Vermont home, and Ian and Gather take off on the run. Even with the help of their community, will they have a home to come back to? Gathers a sensitive portrayal of family that battles substance abuse told in a wry, cautious first-person voice. Kenneth Cadow brings a hopeful story to one's team's resilience. In Outcasts, the stunning conclusion to the Ferryman trilogy by Claire McFall, Dylan and Tristan have finally managed to find their place among the living. But with wraiths from the wasteland having escaped, causing destruction in their world, there's chaos and two souls are taken to the wasteland as stand-ins for Dylan and Tristan instead. Will they let these people be unjustly sentenced to death for them or sacrifice themselves and be separated forever? Is there another way to save the world and themselves? We'll just have to find out.
If a feel-good story about friendship and aspiration, told in letters and perfect for fans of Jane Austen and Bridgerton sounds like your kind of novel, look no further than Yours from the Tower. The year is 1896, and Polly is teaching in an orphanage. Sophia is scouting for a rich husband at the London season, and Tirzah is stuck acting as an unpaid companion to her grandmother. In a series of letters buzzing with atmosphere and drama, readers will follow along as the friends share their dreams, hopes, frustrations, and romances, and will be rooting for each of them to find love and happiness in their own right. In her heartfelt second collection, performance poet Sophia Thacker examines what it means to be a woman yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Wearing My Mother's Heart takes readers on an emotionally charged journey, examining how previous generations of women have given us the freedom to speak out today. Sophia Thacker offers an expertly crafted new collection about intergenerational relationships that touches on identity, race, politics, mental health, and self-love, and encourages readers to find their own voice.
We have several YA graphic novels we want to highlight this season. One in a Million is a YA graphic novel by debut author Claire Lorden, whose high school experience was plagued by an unnamed chronic illness that doctors struggled to identify. After experiencing a ton of chronic fatigue, pounding headaches, and weight gain, all completely foreign to this previously happy and athletic teen, they finally realize she has a brain tumor and they make moves to act. It's really a beautiful memoir that details how her illness opened the door to depression and other unexpected side effects, but Claire makes it through. In a time when we're still exploring the long-term effects of COVID, this memoir will feel familiar to many readers who are struggling to figure out the source of their own chronic illnesses, no matter what their age. From webtoon sensation and Oh No comic artist Alex Norris, who uses they, them pronouns, comes a brightly illustrated queer guide to dating, relationships, and identity. This book is inclusive of all genders and sexualities and explores those delightfully fizzy and beautiful feelings that descend upon you when you fall in love. How do you navigate it? And what do you do when love is so earth-shattering or when it destroys you to your core? A deeply honest, inclusive, one-of-a-kind guide offering valuable insights for all humans on everything from first love to self-love to love ever after. And finally, the 10th anniversary of the Pura Belpré award-winning novel Yaki Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass by Meg Medina is celebrated by a couple notable moments. Meg has been named the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature by the Library of Congress, and the book is also coming out in graphic novel form with illustrations by Mel Valentine Vargas. Awash in shades of blue, familiar readers will experience Pity's anxiety about Yaki in a fresh way, and many new readers will discover Meg's timely and realistic portrayal of high school bullying in this dynamic new format.
And next up, we have Untraceable. Aya De Leon returns with this prequel to the 2023 Jane Addams Children's Book Award winner, Undercover Latina. Set in the high-stakes world of The Factory, an international organization of spies protecting people of color, Untraceable is a fast-paced, ripping spy novel focusing on Amani, who fans will remember from Undercover Latina. Follow along as family secrets are uncovered and Amani's world is turned upside down. And if you haven't had the opportunity to read Undercover Latina yet, which we highly recommend that you do not worry. While Untraceable is a satisfying prequel for existing fans, it also serves as a thrilling introduction for anyone encountering this series for the first time. And next up, we have our YA titles that will be new in paperback this fall. First, we have Absolutely Normal. Absolutely Normal is an incredibly timely anthology edited by Nora Shalloway Carpenter and Rocky Callan. This inspiring and hope-filled mixed genre collection features stories from 16 diverse and notable authors who draw on their own lived experiences with mental health conditions to create stunning works of fiction that will uplift, empower, and may just break your heart and stitch it back together stronger than before. Calling all K-pop fans, Alexandra Lee Young's Idol Gossip offers an inside look at a fictional K-pop academy, infused with plenty of drama, gossip, and genuine heart. This deep dive into fan culture and the music industry is perfect for anyone who has wanted to go behind the scenes. We also have Everything I Thought I Knew from Shannon Takaoka, who you'll be hearing from shortly. Don't miss this title, new in paperback with an updated cover. Shannon's compulsively readable debut features 17-year-old Chloe as she wonders if she's inherited more than just a heart from her transplant donor. Readers will be rooting for Chloe right from the beginning in this moving story of hope and healing. And lastly, we have Tasting Light, another anthology that will be new in paperback this fall. Tasting Light takes a unique approach to answering the question, what does the future hold? Featuring 10 speculative short stories by leading young adult authors, Tasting Light imagines what the world could be through the lens of technologies that are just emerging today.
And just in case you missed them, here are some of our spring 2023 YA titles. The Family Fortuna. This is a dark and dazzling YA debut by critically acclaimed middle grade author of Hour of the Bees, Lindsay Eager, and is a perfect YA crossover title for fans of Stephanie Garber's Caraval series and Aaron Morgenstern's The Night Circus. New York Times bestselling author Claire Legrand encapsulates this book so perfectly as she says, heartbreaking, irreverent, hilarious, grotesquely gorgeous, and ultimately triumphant, The Family Fortuna paints an unforgettable picture of a dazzling circus, a messy family bursting with equal parts love and resentment, and beautifully of all, a girl finding the courage to accept and embrace and celebrate her true self. A companion novel to her American Indian Youth Literature Award winner, Hearts Unbroken, Cynthia Leidig Smith leads readers on a cross-genre mystery, contemporary YA fiction with gothic fantasy in Harvest House. This novel deliberately makes space for teen readers in upper YA while depicting a misrepresentation of tragedy, law enforcement failures, an inadequate media response, and offensive local lore repurposed for public entertainment. The novel also gives a look into the modern Muskogee family and offers information and commentary about the critical issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The Gift Trilogy by New York Times bestselling author Caroline O'Donoghue comes to a climactic and satisfying conclusion in Every Gift a Curse. Magic-sensitive Maeve delves deeper into the darker parts of her magic in order to save innocent teens from the children of Bridget, but how far will she go, and who will she lose in the process? Every Gift of Curse publishes in May 2023, so very soon, so you have time to catch up with the first 2 books in the series, All Our Hidden Gifts and The Gifts That Bind Us. And finally, from New York Times best-selling author and 2-time Carnegie Medal winner Patrick Ness comes a contemporary novella that explores sexuality, confronts toxic masculinity, and discovers support in unexpected places while navigating male romantic relationships and friendships indifferent for boys. I'd now like to introduce our moderator for tonight's panel. Christine Ballo is the co-owner and director of programs for Loyalty Bookstores, a Black, queer, and Asian-owned bookstore located in Washington, D.C. and Silver Spring, Maryland. Christine is a 2022 Publishers Weekly Star Watch honoree and serves on the ABA Bookseller Advisory Council. Her book recommendations have been featured in Book Bibliophile, Diverse Spines, as well as BuzzFeed Books, LitHub, The Washington Post, and Elle.com. Christine is a graduate of Bernard College and can be found on Bookstagram at Reading is Magical. Please welcome Christine as she introduces our author panel for this evening. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. My TBR is longer as I saw your presentation of the other books, but I am especially excited to introduce 3 fabulous authors and 3 fabulous books. Our first author, Sade Lapite, is a British Nigerian and has drawn on her heritage to create the world of her debut novel, Goddess Crown. She spent a significant slice of her childhood nestled in the library, inhaling books by Diana Wynne-Jones, Tamora Pierce, Lois Duncan, and Mildred T. Taylor. Her love for the arts led her to a degree in media arts at Royal Holloway, University of London. And she now lives in Toronto and juggles writing with her career in digital marketing. Her blog, Coffee Bookshelves, celebrates writing and promotes titles by authors of color. You can find her fangirling over Korean dramas on Twitter at The Shady Files, or sharing her favorite books on Instagram at Sade Lapite. Yay! And thank you, Sade, welcome. And our second author joining us, Shannon Takaoka, is the author of the young adult novel, Everything I Thought I Knew, which was a 2021 Kansas National Education Association Reading Circle recommended title, and a 2022 Tasha's Reading List selection. She lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with her family, where she also works as a business writer and editor, and her upcoming book, The Totally True Story of Gracie Byrne, So good, y'all. And last but certainly not least, Maggie Tokuda Hall has an MFA in creative writing from the University of San Francisco and a strong cake decorating game. Whew. She is the author of the young adult novel, The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, an indie bestseller and recipient of the Northern California Book Award in Children's Literature, as well as the picture book, Also an Octopus, illustrated by Benji Davies, which won a Parents' Choice Gold Award, Squad, illustrated by Lisa Sterl, and Love in the Library, illustrated by Yaz Imamura. Maggie Tokuda Hall lives in Oakland, California, with her husband, children, and dog. Welcome, 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 y'all. I'm so excited to have this conversation and talk about your fabulous books. I think to get started, maybe we can have y'all introduce yourself and then just tell us a little bit about your book. And Shadi, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Hi, Christine. Hi, everybody. So I'm Sade Lakite, and my book, so excited to hold this because I just got the advanced reader copy today, is Goddess Crown. And it is about a 16-year-old girl who's very daring and courageous, and she has been raised by a small group of guardians in a secluded area. It's very mysterious. But a group of mercenaries attack her home and force her to go on the run. And while she's on the run, she discovers who her parents are and that she is heir to the throne of this country, Gala. So she decides that, that she's got to find out more about her parents, but also who is responsible for killing the only family that she's known and who's after her, which means going to the royal court, which is in the capital of the country, and which is a very opulent and beautiful place, but with a lot of dark secrets.
It's so good. I'm not going to do any spoilers, obviously, but I'm just going to be talking about how good they are, and everyone can just get excited for when you get the arcs. Shannon, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your book?
Yes, my name is Shannon Takaoka, and The Totally True Story of Gracie Byrne is my second YA book. My first came out, Everything I Thought I Knew came out in October 2020, and that's going to be in paperback in October. And this one comes out October 31st, which is Halloween. So that's kind of fun. Anyhow, the book is about a 16-year-old girl named Gracie who's kind of shy and awkward. And she finds an old journal that belonged to her grandmother that gives her the power to rewrite reality, which is a pretty exciting thing for Gracie. Her life is not going so great at the moment. She's starting a new school. She's a little unsure of her place. She's moving in with her grandmother, who her family is taking care of because she's suffering from Alzheimer's disease. So at first it's kind of exciting to be able to change the way things are. But as her imagination starts to cause a little too much chaos, she realizes it might be a little bit more than she bargained for. So that's the story.
I love Gracie. Oh, okay. And Maggie, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, so I'm Maggie Tokuda Hall, and The Siren, the Song, and the Spy is the sequel to The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, which was my young adult debut that came out in 2020. And I'm just so excited. It takes every single character who was in book one. They get to have like a moment or be a point of view character, lots of side characters who felt like maybe you wouldn't get to see them again, including Keiko, Evelyn's lady's maid, Alfie, Flora's brother, and the Pirate Supreme and Zenobia, with their interpersonal dramatics that were hinted at in book one, but are on the page in book two. And it's got explosions and justice and all of my favorite things. So I'm just really excited to share it with everyone.
Yeah, it's such a great continuation of The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea. And I loved how there were characters you'll recognize and then a whole bunch of new characters and expanding the world. I'm curious for y'all. So like Maggie, there's a ton of character POVs in your books. And then Sade and Shannon, like it's all told from the same perspective. I'm curious, for all of you, did you go into it knowing that that's what you wanted to do? Did that change over time? And why did you decide to go with you know, a single point of view or multiple point of views?
I mean, I think for
Shannon.
me, yeah, this book was so Gracie from the start that I just don't think it would have worked without it being like completely in her point of view. I think the story kind of tells you how you want to tell it. And for this one, her voice just was really strong for me.
That makes sense.
I can go next then. It's completely from the main character Calathea's point of view, but there's been so very many drafts of this book, and so I've experimented a few different ways, and so there were drafts where there were multiple different characters and the story was told from different perspectives, and then we decided that actually this just having the one main character, just in terms of how the story unfolded, actually worked better. So it was trial and error.
For The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, it was like a really difficult learning curve. That was my very first novel that I'd ever written. And so there was just like a lot of learning happening on the page while I was writing it. And so doing it from multiple perspectives was a choice that came up, much like Sade, like over many drafts and as I was learning how to tell that story. But by the time I got to The Siren, the Song, and the Spy, I was much more sure of exactly what I was doing with this story. And because thematically it's so much about many disparate forces coming together, and the way that this world has so many different nations that are involved in it, telling it from a single perspective felt almost irresponsible by the second book, because there were so many different groups that needed to be represented and needed to feel like full-fledged characters and not have their stories kind of elided by someone else's point of view. And so by the second book, I was like delighting myself by getting to kind of be whoever I wanted while I was writing it, which was a real pleasure.
Yeah, I love that. For you guys, the first kernel of inspiration for your book, was it the story first, the world first, a character that kind of was like speaking to you? And Maggie, I know, this is the sequel, so for Mermaid, feel free to jump in for that one.
Sure. For The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, I have talked before about how it was written very much for one kid who I used to tutor. I tutored her in creative writing from the time she was like 9 years old until she was 18, and got to advise her on her college thesis as well. But when she was a kid, it was clear to me that A, that she was this tremendous reader, B, that she was queer and didn't know it yet, and C, really wanted that from her books and hadn't found it yet. And so when I was writing The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, that was sort of, I wanted to tell this like big, grand, queer love story that had all the things that all the best fantasy love stories for heterosexual kids have, but for queer kids, or with like centering this queer romance. And what's fun is like, she's an adult now, and I still feel like this series is so much for her. And so like this book is still dedicated to her, but it's dedicated to the adult she's become. And I hope that this story in a lot of ways is beyond kind of like the first book is so much about like interpersonal love. And in the second book, I tried really hard to address so many other kinds of love between mothers and daughters, the love you feel for your own country, the love you feel for people who you have more complicated relationships with, redemptive love, all these different things, and not necessarily limiting it to romantic love. And so that was kind of where the sequel, or the first book, was like that one-to-one intense love. And then I hope that the sequel addresses like much more complicated ideas of how love can present itself.
Yeah, I think that definitely comes through. Sade, how about for you?
The story came first, which is actually quite interesting now when I think about it, because I wrote the first draft for National Novel Writing Month, where you write a 50,000 words, story in 1 month. And so you just need a really strong story that it's got enough legs to actually get those 50,000 words out. So I thought, right, what's a good scenario? And I decided I would do sort of Anne Boleyn, one of Henry VIII's wives, and like her daughter, Elizabeth I. And so that was like the scenario when I wrote the
Oh my
first
God.
draft.
I love
And then
that.
I just got it.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry, please continue.
It's okay. So then over time, it was interesting because over time, like the main character, Calathea, right, just became so larger than life that actually, it's surprising to me that, oh yeah, that story did come first, because the character, so many things changed in the story, but the character was this just driven, bold person who doesn't back down and will sort of fight you to the end. And if she needs to know the answer to something, she's gonna figure it out. And so once her character was set, it didn't change, and things around her changed, the scenario changed, the location changed, all kinds of things, genre changed, but she was always the same. So the story was there and the character was there.
Yeah, I love her. She's such a great character, and like you're just rooting for her from like the first sentence, and it was such a joy to see her growth and journey through the book, and possibly other things to come. Who knows? I hope so. We'll see.
Yeah.
And Shannon, how about for you? What was that first kernel of inspiration?
I think it's probably character. There's definitely a couple of kernels there. Some was definitely inspired by my real life. When I was a teen, my grandmother lived with my family for a while when she was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. And, I remember that time very well. And I really did want to explore a family going through that situation. So that was part of it. But then, I had this idea in my mind of a girl who collects words, and that did that's in the book, but it receded a little bit. And I was trying to think about how I wanted this, who this character was going to be. And I really started to think about that feeling of when you're a teen and you feel like you're the most boring person who ever lived, and everybody else must be much more confident, much more funny, and more athletic, all these things than you. And I realized, now as an adult, that most people probably felt, even people at the top of the social pyramid, felt insecure a lot of the time. But I just kind of thought about that as a character. And then also, a character who has this very vivid imagination where she kind of daydreams about how she would like people to perceive her. And then that got me thinking, what if you found a way to actually make those ideas happen and manifest those? And would all your problems be solved, or would it feel like a cheat? So that was the idea.
Yeah. Gracie too is just, she is so real. Like I want to like call her up and be like, hey girl, what are you doing this weekend? Let's go see Rocky Horror, So speaking of Gracie and her love of interesting words, right? She collects them in her journal, uses them as like maybe to spark a story idea. Is there a word for all of you, or several, whatever you want to share? Is that one, either that you love the word, like how it feels to say it, and or the meaning behind the word?
Well, I've got one. It's shenanigans.
Yes,
I just
so fun
think
to say.
hilarious word to say. Also, it kind of matches my name, Shannon, shenanigans. So, and I actually did use that word in everything I thought I knew. And the character Kai says it in the book, and that is why Chloe finds him very endearing, because he uses shenanigans. So,
yeah. I love it. I love it. Maggie, anything?
Yeah, I love words. I think I have Gracie's tendency of I like to collect them. Poltroon is probably my favorite insult right now, which is like a deep coward. And then my favorite word where I love the meaning is probably limerence, for the feeling of being like the fresh in love feeling, where it's like all encompassing and so intense, that kind of like first breath of love. I love that word.
What was the word again?
Limerence.
Limerence.
I know, right? I want to note that down. That's such a pretty word.
I like that.
I think my word is swashbuckling. It's
Oh,
not in the
yeah.
book, but I feel like it's just this kind of old school word that you don't generally use, but I feel like it kind of sums up the feel of that world that Calathea is in, where just people are on horses and they have swords and that kind of thing, and it's just kind of swashbuckling. So my word
I
right
love
now.
that. I love that. I love the word smorgasbord. I think
Uh,
it's fun to say, and I just purely for like the fun of it is Oaxaca. It's like one of my favorite words to say. Anyway.
I love this. I love hearing
Yeah,
everybody.
I know
With a
it's
nice feel to
fun.
it. Yeah.
It is, yeah. All right, so let's talk about like world building, which you know, like I think a lot of people, you know, really only think of it for like sci-fi fantasy, but your world building, regardless of like when your story is set, like for Gracie, you know, it's 87, right? And you know, you're creating this whole world of like her life and her school and the town and like walking to pick up her grandma and stuff. And then obviously the world of Siren is even bigger. And then in Gala too, it's like, you know, there's hints of things, you know, you don't see everything, right? So I'm sure like as you're creating this world, there's a lot that you do that maybe there's like one sentence that you refer to, but I imagine you have a lot more behind the scenes that you thought about when you're creating this world. Can you speak to that a little bit? What the process was like for y'all with world building? Sade,
In
if
terms
you'd like
of,
to start.
yeah, sure. In terms of my world building, I think that I'm a bit of a lazy researcher. So I think I kind of take the real world and just mess with it a little bit. So you know, I'll change the names of things, and then if something doesn't exist that I need in the world, like I've got, you know, 7 real animals, but this animal that I want over here, it doesn't exist, so I'm going to make that one up. But I think that like my story is set in sort of a pre-colonial West Africa, and that writing about that I felt like was sort of almost like creating a new world from scratch, because I just didn't know anything about, you know, like if we're in 1300s West Africa, you know, what is the farming like, what are people wearing, what are people eating, what jobs are people doing? And so it was like coming to it completely fresh. And I didn't, it's like, you know, I thought, gosh, I could sit down and spend 5 years trying to research this, or I could just do a little bit of research, do a bit of guessing, and then borrow some things from other cultures to sort of fill in the gaps. And so it was sort of a merging together of different things to build the world. But it's been such an interesting journey doing that, the research that I did, that I'm like, definitely in future books, it's I think it's a world that I kind of want to stay in, because it's quite fascinating to me, historical Africa. So yeah, it's just like an intriguing, fascinating experience researching that.
Yeah, cool. Shannon?
Well, so I do feel like my world building situation, it was probably, I'm in awe of what Sade and Maggie do, because that feels like magic to me.
It's a nightmare, Shannon. Don't do it.
It's just you know, creating something wholly original and new like that it's wild. So while I have a bit of magic in my books, they're grounded in a real world setting for me to have something to ground myself. So, you know, my first book was set in California, and I live in California. So a lot of the setting it was inspired by places that I'm familiar with. I grew up in Pittsburgh, where where Gracie's set. And so that kind of just gets me started. And I definitely will, you know, embellish from there, but it really helps me to have some visuals. I do a lot with Pinterest, for example, where I'll just pull photos of houses and interiors and streets and the way things looked in 1987, for example. And that really helps me kind of, you know, get the creative juices flowing in terms of building the world. I like to kind of visualize things as I'm working. It helps a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maggie, how about for you?
Well, it's just a constant waking nightmare.
Don't hold back.
No, it's a labor of love, and I am 40% joking, but I did a ton of research because I wanted to be thoughtful about it, and because these two books are so much about colonization, I felt like I had a real responsibility to make sure that I wasn't accidentally perpetuating colonial myths and doing more harm. And so like the new country that we spend a lot of time in the Siren, this Song and the Spy, is this, like, it's the Red Shore, and it's where the Warrior are from. And I did a lot of research into sort of like pre-Columbian tribes and things like that, and to try to like help and combining it with like some completely made up things and things borrowed, like Sade was saying, like borrowed from other cultures as well. And then I remembered I was writing a fantasy novel and I could do whatever I wanted. And so I gave them spotted hyenas because I can, and no one can stop me.
Yes.
And I think for me, it's like the balance of, it's hard not to be beholden to the research. And so finding the balance of, you know, being thoughtful about how you present even made up cultures, while also allowing yourself to still be imaginative and like have a good time. Because if you are having this like laborious, terrible time creating this world, I feel like it's also going to be that kind of a read for the other person who you're at, you know, for the readership. And so I hope that some of the fun that I had, despite the like much research that I took probably a little too seriously for very small details, comes through.
I think it does. And I have to say, as a, you know, F the colonizers Filipino, I was
Right?
like filled with glee for a lot of the book. So well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so if you could live in a fictional universe, could be a movie, book, what world would you want to live in? Assuming it's like things are chill, right? Like it's not when the orcs are invading the Shire. It is when like everyone is just like hanging out and relaxing. Is there a world that you would want to live in?
I feel like I read too much dystopia to this question.
Fair
I'm like, I don't know.
Fair
if I would
point.
live
Yeah, you don't want to live in.
right. Maybe the night circus. That is a really beautiful
Ooh.
world. Yeah, that's a pretty cool world. But
Yeah.
And
a
like
lot
so
of the stuff I read.
sensual too. Like
Yeah.
Yes, for
just,
sure.
like, good food, performances, beauty.
I like that.
I would live in, I think Tommy Adeyemi's Children of Blood and Bone, but
Ooh.
we're obviously without all the wars that are going on and the world with
Right.
magic when they're not being
Yeah.
hunted and, you know, murdered and stuff. So yeah, that world.
During a time of peace.
That's it.
Yes. Oh, great
I would
answers.
for sure live in The Bells by Danielle Clayton. They have like
Ooh.
these little tiny animals that they get to keep as pets. Like they get like a little like giraffe you can hold in your hand. I literally can't think of anything
Oh
better.
my God.
Everyone would be like involved in palace intrigue, and I would just be in the corner with my giraffe, like, yes, my pretty.
Amazing, brilliant. Speaking of little tiny giraffes, so Halothea, she has her monkey companion in Goddess Crown, and then the Waryuta warriors, they have their hyena familiars. If you could have an animal familiar or a companion, what do you think it would be? Or what would
Mine
you
would be
want?
spotted hyenas. That's why I put them there.
Yeah.
They're like deeply social animals, and they can, like, they're not pets. I'm not saying like go pet them, but if I could, I would. So
Yeah.
UC Berkeley used to keep a colony of hyenas for studying in like the Berkeley Hills, and through incredible persistence, I was able to get my way in as a grad student at a different institution.
I love this for you.
Yeah, I did. It was amazing. And I did actually get to like give hyenas scritches, and when they're not engaged in like interpersonal struggles with one another, they're like pretty chill around people. Like they don't really mind. And so they like let me pet them through the fence and stuff, because they were like kind of like big cats that are capable of killing you. And I like them very much.
I love it.
I think I really liked Yeye, Calithea's monkey.
Mhm.
He's adorable, and I'd quite like to have a monkey. I feel like they're super smart, and it would just be like having a friend, but who can get into tight spaces that you can't get into, and make them really smart. I really wanted to make him a sort of talking monkey, but I was like, it's not a magical world. You can't make him talking. So he just, he's just very smart.
Yes, very curious, and I loved him. Yeah. Shannon, how about for you?
Well, Gracie accidentally manifests a live owl in the book, but I personally wouldn't want an owl to be my companion because they're very big, and I think that would be messy. So I'm going to be super basic and say I am a dog person and I love dogs. So, and though I will say that my dog does look, he's not here right now because he barks too much. My husband doesn't want to walk, but he looks like a hyena a little bit. So
Hey.
There you go. Love it, love it. I would want a little polar bear, a baby polar
that's
bear
good.
specifically.
good one.
What do you do with it once it grows up though? Because polar bears will straight up hunt a human.
Well, I feel like
guess
we
it's-
would, if we grew up together,
Mhm.
you know, like
It's
he
like
would
a
be-
Mowgli situation. It's not.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I
you'd
buy
be the
it.
'Cause
one
we're
human
like-
that the polar bear
Yeah.
respected.
Exactly. We're like, you know, we have the mind meld thing going on in this magical world that I've made up in my mind. All right, so let's see. Oh, and then if anyone in the audience has a question, you're welcome to put it in, and we can like bring, you know, weave them into the conversation or get to them towards the end. So Maggie, I know you mentioned the girl, now young woman, who you had in mind or wrote the story for. I'm curious for it, and you're welcome if you have other thoughts on this, please chime in, but also for Shannon and Sade, who did you have in mind as the audience when you were writing this book?
I mean, I think for me, it was just, I think a lot about teens are under so much pressure to kind of figure so much out, like by the time they're 17, like what do they want to do with their lives? Who do they want to be? And I just wrote it for anyone, and I wanted them to know, any teens to know that, you don't have to know. You are growing and learning and changing, and you don't have to have everything figured out by the time you're 16 or 17. And that's okay. So I think I wrote it for any kid who's just unsure about who they are, because I think that's how a lot of us are, even as we get older, so, and that was probably what I had in mind when writing it.
Yeah, I love that.
I think my one, I feel like I wrote it for sort of teenage me, really. I really loved Tamora Pierce growing up, and just loved like fairy tales and stories about like heroes on horses with swords, and it was almost always boys, and if it was girl, she wasn't a black girl. And so I'm just like, wow, this girl, she gets to do all the stuff that I really wanted to read when I was growing up. And so I just hope that, I was so glad that, that you can go out in the world and that story can be out there. So yeah.
I love that. Maggie, do you want to add anything?
I mean, I hope everyone who's here reads The Siren and the Spy. But I did really write it for like a particular person. And I like to think that it has appeal outside of her, of course. But I think a lot of writers suffer with like people pleasing, like we want to make everyone happy. We want our stories to be universal. And sometimes when we do that, we dull the edges of our own voices. And in order to keep the voice and the perspective on the story as clear as I possibly could. I really did try to keep one reader in mind the whole time so that I wasn't getting lost with thinking like, oh, but will this other person like it? It's like, they're not an issue right now. You're just writing for Claire. And that took a lot of the pressure off of me and really helps me focus.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think there is something universal in specificity, right? Like we all experience a lot of the same things and have a lot of the same feelings, and especially when you're a teen, and it's just so big and it feels so consuming, and it's individual, but like other people feel a lot of the same things. So I think even though you wrote this for Clara, it's something that is appealing to a wide group of people. So well done, all of you. Yes. All right, I'm gonna jump into a couple audience questions while we're here. What was your favorite book growing up? And I'm gonna combine some. What are you guys currently reading?
I'm currently reading The Devil in Silver by Victor Laval. He's a horror writer. This is one of his earlier books. And it is so realistic and like plausible feeling. It's about a man who gets institutionalized during an arrest that seems unrelated to his mental health. But it's easier for the cops to drop him off in this mental institution for 72 hours holding than it is for them to do the paperwork if they bring him back to the police station. They leave him there and he gets stuck there for like months. And it is such an incredible indictment of how we handle mental health in our country, but also how we handle like where mental health and race come together. He's such an incredible writer, and it's a really good book that I have to read like small amounts of at a time because it is a little too real sometimes. And and growing up, I was actually a very reluctant reader. So Calvin and Hobbes by Bill Watterson were my like most special books that meant the most to me and that like I've held on to throughout my whole life.
Yeah, I love that.
My dog's name is Hobbs.
Aww.
And he kind of looks like a spotted hyena. So I feel like
He's doing a lot for me.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'll just add that this is what I just picked up today, and this is you already talked about this earlier in the program, but I'm so excited for this book. I know Nora and Rocky. They were both in my debut group when Everything I Thought I Knew came out, and I went on retreat them. I just think it's so important. It's been such a rough couple of years, especially for so many kids this age in terms of mental health. I am a lifelong, I've struggled lifelong with anxiety. I just think it's so important to tell stories, normalize mental health issues, normalize living with mental health issues. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. And growing up, I think one of the books that I just always go back to and read with my own kids is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. I just love that book so much. And I love all of her writing because she treated kids like they could handle, interesting, smart, challenging stuff. And I really, really love that book. So those are my two.
Love it.
I just read Delicious Monsters by Lizelle Sambury. She's a Canadian writer, and it was so good. It's about these two teen girls who have very difficult relationships with their mothers, and they both end up at this house, this sort of haunted house in Northern Ontario, and sort of uncover its secrets, and like this kind of like a psychological thriller. So good. And growing up, I think my favorite book was probably Howl's Moving Castle by Diane Wynne Jones. Just I think her writing is so magical, and I just loved how the way that she, her magic is very clever, and her worlds are just so they're kind of cozy, but also a little bit dark. So I just really love her books.
Yeah. Oh, so
It's a good one.
Yeah.
I've never read her.
So good,
That's
so
okay.
good. Highly
know.
recommend.
You have
know,
you
it's,
have so many adventures ahead of you, Maggie.
Exactly.
I'm excited for you. Okay, just to change it up a little bit, who was your first and or current bookish crush? Whoever you want to share. I'll
I
go
read a lot
first
of
while you're
romance,
thinking.
so I feel
Huh?
like
Oh,
I
you
said
read a
I
lot of
read a lot of
romance?
romance, so this is
Ooh.
like
You can tell us more than one if you're inspired to. Mine was Gilbert Blythe. I know that's like not original, but I mean, you know,
From
Gilbert.
which book?
From Anne of Green Gables.
Oh, I feel like I'm the only
Yeah.
person who has not read that book or watched the
Oh,
show. I
that's
should
okay.
rectify.
It's really fabulous.
I'm still thinking.
I know. Hard-hitting questions.
Simmering from the Enchanted Forest Chronicles when I was in like 7th and 8th grade. It was like a big like, do I want to be her or kiss her? Not sure. Complicated feelings.
Totally get that.
I think my one is Stacy from the book Rod of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. Just because, you know, it's set in the Depression in 1930s, America, and it's a really harsh world, but he's the older brother of the main character, but I feel like he's just very down to earth, very grounded and very calm, and just kind of noble, and sort of everyone's a little bit heroic in terms of just managing that time. So yeah.
Love it.
Okay, so I just read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, which I just adored that book so much. So I think because that's just on my brain, I'm going to say Marx, the character of Marx in the book, because no, like he just kept everyone together, kept that friend group together, and was such a lovely character. So so that's what I'm going to say, Marx from Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
I love that. He's a great book boyfriend, or partner or friend. Thank you. All right, gonna jump to a couple more audience questions. And I know we'll be wrapping up soonish. Okay, so Donna's asking, so a lot of their book club teens wonder if they could become authors one day. So for you, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your high school self about your wishes and efforts to become a writer?
You don't need to do it right now. I think so many kids right now, with the way that we talk about college admissions and stuff, they feel like they have to be sure of what they're doing when they're like 17 years old. And I don't know, I feel like the best choices I made for being a writer at that age were making terrible choices in my life so that I would have fodder to write about for the rest of my life. And also because I loved writing at that age and I was trying really hard, but I did not have a handle on my own voice yet. I sounded very much like a very poor version of Kurt Vonnegut. Like it was, and so this idea that you need to like rush into a professional space is such a waste. You have your childhood, you have your youth to misspend, and I hope that you do. And that would be, I don't know, just like there's no rush.
Yeah, that's really good advice, Maggie. I think my one would be, I feel like I'm sort of the laziest person. I could just be a sloth hanging from a tree, right? So I think that, and yet I've managed to write a whole book. So I think, just pace yourself. Like, I think if you just write a bit every day, like if you write like 100 words a week, right, you will eventually have a book, you know, over time. So just I think like kind of persistence, but just bits. You can just write it in bits. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to sit down and write 1,000 words a day or anything like that. Just when it comes to you, when you feel like it, take notes in between, you know, have a notebook, maybe keep everything together and just do it in bits at your own pace.
Yeah, and I like my son and I just had a conversation about this last night. He's 14 and he's taking a film writing class over spring break, and he wrote a piece about how frustrating it is to want something to come out perfect the way it was in your head on the page. And we talked a lot about this is such an important lesson of creating something, is that good writing comes from bad writing. Good writing comes from lots of bad writing. Like, don't be afraid to just have fun and experiment, enjoy yourself, but it's not going to look like how you picture it in your head at first. It's most of writing, I say 90% of writing is revision. And the first draft is a mess. It's always going to be a mess. But the more you do it, the better you get and the more you learn. Just like anything else, like playing a musical instrument or anything else. It's just, and do it because you love it and because it's fun for you, not because you feel like you have to. That's what I think. Yeah.
I love that. All really good advice, regardless of what age you are. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up with one more question. I'm going to kind of combine an audience question and one of mine together. Because I'm a Libra and I'm indecisive, so.
Me too.
Yay. Okay, so writing for young people has probably never been more scrutinized. How does that affect your writing and your public presence? And tacking on my question is, what's something you've learned about yourself while through the process of writing your book or writing in general? Sade, would you like to go?
Okay, so writing writing for young people being more scrutinized. I think that you can. I feel like you just have to write what you want to write, and if you kind of try to write for what other people want or what you think they want, then it becomes debilitating. So I think you just kind of write whatever you want to write, and you then see where it goes, and then put it out there, and people may like it or people may not like it, or you don't know what the response is going to be, but you can't control that, and you shouldn't want to. You just create what you want to create. And what have I learned over writing this project? Writing this book, I feel like that, it's about a heroine, and I feel like what I've discovered is that there's many ways to be a hero, and we don't all agree on that. And there's it's not a good way, it's not a bad way, it's just that people have different journeys and there's different ways to be heroic. And I think that's just through Calathea's character, that was an interesting discovery.
I love that. Also, maybe you're not as lazy as you think you are, because you wrote a whole book. Just saying.
It could be. It's over a long time.
Right.
But subjective, right?
Yeah. Shannon, how about for you?
I love what Sade said about writing what you want to write, and not because I think if you do try to think too hard about there's a lot going on out there right now, and especially with the book banning and all of that, I just feel like I'm going to write what I'm going to write, and I'm not going to worry about that stuff, because first of all, it shouldn't be happening. We should all be fighting back. And but I do think a lot about, as a parent myself, what these kids are dealing with a lot of stuff, and so I try to kind of keep that in mind as I write, and making things relevant for them. And in terms of what I've learned, I would say, because this is my second book, there was a time where I was like, was my first book just a fluke? Am I going to be able to do this again? So I think the second book, I learned a lot from the first book. And, I just learned that I had to tell myself, you did this once, you can do it again. So I think I really learned a lot about my writer's confidence, and that, to trust it, trust that, if I had done it before, I could do it again.
So. I love that. Yeah, you did. You wrote a whole nother book.
Yes.
You did that. And Maggie, for you.
Yeah. I think I agree very much with what's already been said, and also that like once it goes out into the world, it's no longer yours. I'm reminded of that the most when I talk to teenagers about different books that I've written and kind of their responses to it. And I kind of have to fight the impulse to be like, oh, here was what I was thinking about. You're like, nope, it doesn't matter. Like all that matters once it's gone to a reader is like what their experience of it was and what that means to them. And the only kind of pertinent follow-up questions are like, what did that mean to you? Did that change anything? Like, did you enjoy this? Not, were you thinking about pre-Columbian Colombia when you were
Yeah.
reading this? Because that's what I was thinking about. Like no one gives a shit. So, and I guess what I have learned from writing this book, particularly with the Siren, the Song and the Spy, was to like really trust my instincts, I guess. Like I, much more so than with The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, knew exactly what this story was when I sat down to write it. And it was when I would try to fight and be like, oh, maybe it's this other thing, that I would get the most off track and then like need to pull myself back in. And those were invariably the pages that ended up getting deleted. And so I don't know. I think, writing is so much a process of getting to know yourself. And the more that you do it, the more you know yourself and the more you can hear when you stray away from your own voice. And your own voice is the only guiding principle you really have that can like do anything real for you. It's the only goalpost that really matters in a lot of ways. And so I don't know, I think it made me a lot more confident in what I do to write this second book and realize, when I trust myself, the story goes well. And when I don't, when I second guess constantly, that's when it gets lost.
Yeah.
So
I love that. Thank you all so much. I, as a bookseller, like I read hundreds of books a year, right? And I genuinely, like, I was excited to read the books, but it was such a joy to read all three of them. And I'm so delighted for other booksellers and librarians and influencers and all the bookish people. And of course, like the teens and teens at heart to read these three books. Like there's such a treat. There's so much going on. And they're like, incredible characters, incredible worlds. So it's been such a joy to talk to all three of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christine.
yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you to Candlewick for hosting us for this.
Yes. Thank you, Candlewick.
Candlewick.
Thank you guys so much. I was sitting here just like, I could just keep listening to you all. This conversation was amazing. It was so, so good. So I'm really sad that now this is like the end of the preview. But hi, we're concluding the end of the fall 23 preview. We hope everyone had a great time. I'd just like to thank all of our guest authors for coming: Sade, Maggie, Shannon, our wonderful moderator, Christine, my colleague, Sophie, and Rachel, who's running things behind the scenes. Thank you, thank you. Don't forget, the video will be on demand, so other attendees can watch this again and again, or if you missed it, you can share it with your friends. And you can request physical ARCs or digital ARCs of all the titles mentioned tonight, including Sade, Maggie, and Shannon's books. A link should pop up on your browser once the webinar ends, with all of the links you can access and all kinds of stuff. And Sophie is dropping our virtual goodie bag into the chat. So that's it. Thank you all for joining us. Stay safe and goodbye. Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.